Don't forget to like, comment, share and subscribe, and do consider supporting the channel via PayPal or Patreon. You'll find the links in the video description. 7 rounds have been played in the Norway chess tournament, and I'd like to look at one of those 7th round games. This is Viswanathan Anand and Teimour Radjabov. Their classical game was drawn, so that meant they went into an Armageddon. So Anand has 10 minutes with he has white. Radjabov has 7 minutes, but black has draw odds. So Vishy in a must-win situation. It's a gioco piano. And d3. Vishy doesn't go for the trendy lines with d4, but just d3. And now, well, many moves are possible. Knight d2, castles, h3. Anand goes for bishop g5. So this immediately sharpens the game. And that's what Anand wants in a must-win situation. So why does it make it sharper? Why is it more double-edged? Because white is pinning the knight to the queen. The bishop would love to step back to e7. That would solve a few problems to break the pin. But it means that black has to be, well, how can I put it, slightly creative in breaking this pin. So h6. By the way, I should say that their classical game just before this had actually gone castles. And, well, that was a more traditional kind of gioco piano. But I think this bishop g5 variation is an interesting way for white to play, because you just get such an unbalanced position already. a5, so that gives the bishop a square to drop back to and prevents b4. Knight d2, and Radjabov just waits for a moment, puts the bishop way back. I mean, it's a useful move, but it's also a waiting move. So now that Anand has committed, then Radjabov feels, okay, it's time to go with g5. And now he castles. You don't have to castle here. I mean, there are some interesting ways to play. One could play bishop e6. I guess having played a5, it means that the bishop can actually move to b5, which is a bit annoying. But castles. So you can see that in breaking this pin, black has advanced the g-pawn. Well, it looks very aggressive, but of course this does open up black's king to a certain extent. So it's just double-edged. And rook e1 played. So this mysterious rook move that we often see in these kind of positions with pawns on e4 and e5. Well, here it might just be to do with supporting the e-pawn if white ever plays d4. But also, and this can be crucial, the knight might well drop back to f1, and then it looks at that weakened f5 square as well as d5 as well. So rook e1 is important for a couple of reasons. This is absolutely standard. Knight h7 from Radjabov. So that does allow the queen into the game. And also, now the g-pawn is protected, you might want to push with h5. Now, Carlsen has previously reached this position. And he played here knight f1, just sticking with the program. And I think this looks like an attractive move. I mean, it's a very typical maneuver. This was a game Carlsen against Dominguez, played in an online game in 2021. After h5, obviously that's a threat, but Carlsen just played h4, so that just blocks. And he got in d4, and well, Carlsen won a nice game. That feels like a very sensible way for white to play. It's kind of straightforward. But Anand played h3. And that does give black something to bite on the king side. h5. Nevertheless, d4, this is such a sharp position. So Anand breaking in the middle. And remember, that pawn is loose. So if black would take here, that does, I don't know, it feels very risky somehow, opening this up. I realise there's h4, but still that queen might find its way in. Radjabov didn't risk anything like that. He played queen f6, just holding that pawn and activating the queen. It looks pretty sensible. Bishop b5, so pressure here, and that means there's pressure here. h4 knocks the bishop back, and g4, so there we go. Black just uses that pawn, so it's just something to bite on. Pawn takes pawn, bishop takes. So now it's black that has this pin, which is potentially rather annoying, particularly if you've got this lever of pawn to h3 to undermine the protection for the knight on f3 by getting rid of that pawn on g2. Bishop takes knight. Black recaptures. And incredibly, we're on move 17. This exact position has been reached before in a game between Santos and Chen from Caleta 2020. Went pawn takes pawn. Now, why didn't Anand do this? Looks like a free pawn, because there's the knight and the bishop are protecting. Well, then the queen drops back here, and you can see that after this exchange, that bishop bears down on f2. And black just needs to play king g8, rook g8, and there is significant pressure down the g-file towards white's king. So I really understand why Anand declined to play that. I should say that Anand was playing very quickly. It's really interesting to see. Back to the old days of when Anand was, playing at 90 miles an hour in lots of his games, and in, well, for a period in the 1990s and the 2000s, Anand was supreme among the world's best at rapid play chess. And he seems to have sort of freed up his hand again. There was a time when he really slowed down and was getting into a lot of time pressure. There was indecision. But I don't know what's happened over the past couple of years. He's had a break, of course. Many of us did. But he seems to be playing very quickly. Queen a4. h3. And now he just put the bishop on g3. So that means that this is protected. That's one thing. Blocks the g-file. And the knight can drop back to h2. So queen h6. And now Anand decides to take. I guess you could... Oh, no, you can't, excuse me. Yeah, that's... might be possible. Don't know. At least after the knight comes back to h2, yeah, you have to move the bishop first. Anyway, Anand took on h3. And then rook e3. So I find it interesting how, he's kind of packing the king side here. Although that queen does look very far away. But Anand clearly thought he would be okay here. And it's at this point, with Radjabov under time pressure, I think he had something like 3 minutes left from his original 7. Remember, he just needs a draw, but he's got less time. And here, well, if he'd played f6 just to support that, then black is pretty solid. I mean, it's still very double-edged. Maybe knight h2 or queen takes c6. These are possible. But there is the possibility to, maybe move the rook here. Later on, perhaps even this. But okay, it's a very, very tricky position. But instead, Radjabov played bishop d7. He was under pressure, under time pressure. And Anand seized the moment. He took on e5 and then took on e5 again, opening up the third rank. Queen dropped back, rook g3 check, and you can see that the king has been caught. Bishop g4. And here Vishy returned with the queen. It came back from Siberia and now it's back in the action. And here Radjabov resigned. If the bishop is supported with f5, then f3. So white is going to win this bishop back. And then, well, white has a lot of pawns and the king is really bad. So for example here, actually don't need to rush it too much. Now, take care because queen takes bishop is threatened, but knight c4. I mean, this is just a for example. You know, this could happen. I mean, after knight e3, once white takes here, then it really is curtains. Curtains for the king. And don't forget the queen popping out here as well. You can give the queen up, but this is just winning. White's got too many pieces here, and the king is safe. So anyway, just to recap, here after queen d1, that is where Radjabov resigned. That means that Anand gained ground on Magnus Carlsen. Carlsen drew his classical game against Tari and then lost the Armageddon. So that meant, let's just check the scores, that Anand gained just a little bit. So the leading scores are Carlsen 13.5, Anand 13, then there's a little gap, Mamedyarov 11.5, Vasilikov 11.5. There are still 2 rounds to go, so this tournament is absolutely wide open. And I will report back. Wednesday is actually a free day. Final 2 rounds will be played on Thursday and Friday. Thanks for watching.